Welcome into the Blurred Wire. Today we are gearing up, we're continuously gearing up for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is releasing May 10th. In fact, if you're listening to this, it's probably already out in theaters, and you're probably going to go see it in theaters, and you're probably going to be waiting for like our reaction to it. That's going to be coming out next week because I'm going to go see it on Tuesday. But anyway,
Mhm.
welcome into the podcast with my wonderful co-host Ty. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody, my fellow apes.
I told you. Okay. Warning, I am very sick right now. And I warned Ty, if you make me laugh, I'm going to fall into a coughing fit. But apparently he did not heed that memo. So this will be very interesting. I
If
am sorry for
anything,
the listeners.
if anything, I'm going to try even harder to make you laugh, just
Yeah.
because it's more enjoyable for me.
Maybe I just shouldn't have told you that. That might have been a mistake on my part.
Yeah, I thought you would have figured that out by now, but that's
Yeah, I
okay.
probably should have. But
Maybe
okay.
next time.
Well, at least the movie that we're discussing isn't exactly a comedy. So I think that will help. Like if there's ever a time to talk about a movie while I'm sick, if laughing like makes me break out into cough, this would be the one.
It's yeah, yeah. Next week we're gonna talk about the movie 7 Pounds with Will Smith,
Oh my God.
a
Okay.
total tearjerker.
Right. So as we're getting closer to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I'm seeing a lot of hype like really start to steadily build for it. I think
Mhm.
people are very excited. I think it's going to do well at the box office. And I think it's really going to set off the summer because, like May, this is traditionally a spot for a big Marvel movie because Disney
Mhm.
takes the first weekend of May literally, they've had it every single year since like Avengers, if I'm not mistaken.
Have they really?
I'm pretty sure because 2012 was Avengers and they released a MCU movie every single year and they always take that first week in May. I think the only break was COVID, which is COVID.
Mhm.
So I don't think Black Widow came out till June or July. But like if you look back, it's been every like that first weekend of May is when Disney drops their movies. I want to say Infinity War Endgame may have come out in like April 29th or something like that. But it was like that first week of May. Because like last year it was Guardians of the Galaxy. This
Right.
year is, like I said, this is one of the first years where Disney isn't releasing a Marvel movie. Because originally it was going to be Deadpool and Wolverine was going to come out on this date. And then they moved it to where or Captain America Brave New World was going to come out on this date and Deadpool and Wolverine was going to come out in July, but then they moved that back.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. So now here we are and the Fall Guy didn't do so well at the box office cuz like it kind of took that spot. Have you seen that?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet, but I was just looking to see what else was kind of coming out right now, and that seemed to be the biggest contender
Yeah.
against Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, so I mean until Furiosa comes out, I mean Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has a really good position to reign supreme. And I'm surprised they didn't make Furiosa try to come out like the first weekend in May, especially having like Chris Hemsworth in it as like a big MCU star. Like it would kind of make sense. But
Hmm.
either way, we're talking about War of the Planet of the Apes, which is the movie that comes before Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So if you hear this and you're interested in seeing that movie, please, well, let me hear your thoughts. Do you think it's important? I know you haven't seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but based upon what you've seen in the trilogy, do you think it's important to see all three of these movies before Kingdom?
I mean, I have no idea how it pans out, but it is set to be in the same connected universe. It's supposed to be,
Hmm.
from what I've read, a first in a new trilogy, um, based in the same world that was set up. So I'm sure it will be far enough to where you don't need to, but if it's anything like what Matt Reeves has set up for us, in this initial trilogy, um, I think it could be good to get a good idea of the tone
Yeah.
of how they'll take it.
And I think it's one of those things where, because Kingdom is set like 300 years in the future after the end of War of the Planet of the Apes.
Hmm.
And I think they're going to continue some of those themes. So, like, the same characters aren't even in it. It's just kind of in
Hmm.
the same universe. And I think it's one of those things that you might like appreciate it more or be like, if you're invested in the story of this trilogy, you'll really enjoy the story of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about War of the Planet of the Apes. Of course, again, I love how each movie, like it keeps the ape cast the same, but it's a different human cast. And so,
Hmm.
of course, Andy Serkis returns as Caesar, and
Yep.
the main villain was actually played by Woody Harrelson, as he plays the Colonel. Was he Colonel? Yeah, he's a Colonel Wesley McCulloch, or they just call him the Colonel, and
Hmm.
he's trying to like kind of like the last dish of humans, like the last, I guess, defense of humans trying to maintain their control over the planet before inevitably apes take over.
Yeah, this human cast definitely feels like I mean, they've all been unimportant largely. Like the
Yeah.
focus has always been squarely on the apes, but these humans especially feel unimportant to things that are going down here.
Yeah.
Aside from Woody Harrelson, and he is quite surprisingly so menacing
Oh
in
yeah.
this. He fits the role way better than I thought he would have. My biggest exposure to him was as the character Woody from the classic TV show Cheers. So to
Oh.
go from a sitcom like dim-witted
Mm-hmm.
character, and he's done plenty since then, but
Mm-hmm.
that's when I think of Woody Harrelson, I think of the dim-witted comedic character, and I do not picture this menacing, threatening dude with a buzz cut.
That's so funny. I think I love Woody Harrelson. Like I have a list of top actors, and I think if he's not in the top five, he's definitely in the top 10 because I feel
Hmm.
like he's one of those actors that has so much range. Probably
Hmm.
he can play almost any kind of character. I think even in the Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage, which I think is one of his latest movies,
Hmm.
that whole movie wasn't very good, but he still stood out for his portrayal. Because again, he can just lose himself in any role, including this no nonsense colonel. When usually when you think of Woody Harrelson, you just think of like nonsense. And
Completely.
it's a very different role for him. And I think I love the way that he got to kind of shine in this one. Because in a lot
Hmm.
of movies that he's been in, people usually hire him to be like the secondary character. And
Hmm.
while like the movie doesn't revolve around him, it's like
Hmm.
he's the only like prominent human character. So it
Hmm.
really kind of gave him a chance to like almost like have a platform. Like, and Now You See Me, he was in all the Hunger Games movies. He's a tertiary character, and even in The Edge
Hmm.
of 17, which was a fantastic movie, that he
Hmm.
was in with Haley Steinfeld.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard of that movie before?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Good
a great
movie.
movie. And he was a tertiary character to Haley Steinfeld's character. Even in one movie he was in recently, I think it's called The Man from Toronto. The plot
Hmm.
did not make sense with him and Kevin Hart, but it was hilarious. And again, he was a tertiary character though to Kevin Hart. So I feel like seeing him, while he's technically a tertiary character to Caesar, obviously, because the movie is more about the apes than it is about the human characters. I feel like we get to see him, um, like we just get to focus on Woody Harrelson. I guess I feel like, and it's one of his strongest performances, honestly.
Yeah, for as little screen time as he actually has, when he's on screen, he demands attention and focus
Agreed.
to where every scene with him in it is better because he's in it.
Hmm.
And that's something that I don't think any human character had that effect, whether they be villainous or supportive of Caesar and his troop in the previous two movies, even with Dave Franco playing such a headlining role in the first.
Rise, yeah. Hmm.
So, I mean, kudos to him. He was an absolutely great choice.
Yeah, like I think you're right. Like there's a difference between commanding presence and demanding it. And I feel like
Hmm.
he demanded that presence, demanded you pay attention to him when he was on screen. And there's
Hmm.
very few, and like I don't think most of the human cast in these movies, it's not like they're replaceable. Most of them just kind of fill their role. But like you said, with James Franco in the first one, you probably could have threw in like James Marsden or even like Chris Pine, and it probably would have had like the same effect. I don't think
Hmm.
you can replace Woody Harrelson. I think
Hmm.
what he does, I think he was the perfect choice. And I don't think I really see anyone else doing it as well as he. I'm sure there's another great actor who could have done it the same way he did, but just the menacing, the intensity, and the overall grit that he brought to the role, I think is kind of unmatched by him.
Absolutely. So, how did you feel about the rest of the? Because we lose a lot of for a good portion of this movie. We are with this small band of Caesar and Rocket and Maurice and I'm forgetting the fourth one, the fourth the fourth monkey that he's traveling with. But it's a smaller cast in this movie as a whole. And even
Hmm.
though like in the second half of the movie, we're kind of in this like imprisonment of the apes under the Colonel's watch, none of them really feel like they're true characters in
Hmm.
that aside from our very tightly knit group. How did you feel about that change from the previous movies to this one?
Um, I kind of think I think it made sense for the story that Matt Reeves wanted to tell. And of course, Matt Reeves is a director, having directed
Mhm.
this one, and most people know him for directing the Batman, that came out recently. I think for this film, I was kind of expecting it to kind of be like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was all about like the rising tension, and it kind of felt like the crescendo. And I
Mhm.
thought this movie was going to essentially be the climax, where it was just going to be war throughout the entire movie. You know what I mean? Just
Mhm.
kind of like intense action, like all over the place. And it ended up being like a much smaller, much more grounded storyline. And I realized that kind of makes a whole lot of sense because for a couple of reasons. Like, as much as the way that Caesar's character's been developed, he's still a very peaceful, he's still not really prone to war, right? So, like, he's still not going to go out and just start shooting humans because that's just not his character. Even when he defeated Koba in the other movie, he still thinks the apes should be peaceful. So it wouldn't make sense for them to go into like an all out like war scenario, taking over human towns and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I think compared to I think this one it focused a lot more on Caesar. I feel like the
Mhm.
first movie Rise focused a lot on Caesar. The second one focused on some of the other characters, like Caesar,
Mhm.
his son, his Koba, obviously, and some of the other apes that were around. And this
Mhm.
one, I feel like by isolating Caesar from all those people, it kind of brought it back to the focus of Caesar, um, which I kind of liked. I think it worked well for showing like how the planet um gets this way. And like
Mhm.
honestly, after watching this movie, I'm not surprised that they're doing one after because like I know you mentioned that it feels like it was a good like kind of button on the end, like a good conclusion. And I'm like, to me, like the end, the way that they did this film, it feels more like it's setting up something else. Like this is how we got here, especially with because the Simian flu that had started killing people at the end of Rise of the Planet of the Apes has killed a lot of the population by dawn. When we get to war, not only has it killed most of the human population, but they also all started devolving into like primitive species, which is
Mhm.
to me all setting up Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So like in a way, it was I think Matt Reeves did a great job of balancing wanting to like conclude this trilogy, but also kind of setting up the next thing because it's like this is how the apes ended up being in control of this planet. That's what this trilogy tells. And it's like, okay, well now I want to see the apes in control of the planet, and that's what we're getting on May 10th.
I think I see that in the text, but I think in the subtext, I think there is a nice fitting conclusion with Caesar in this trilogy, with having him essentially throughout all of these movies kind of learn what it takes to be human, because like he feels like he's confronted with a lot of these emotions that we shorthand to being human, but he for the first time, for the first of his species to come into this level of intelligence, he's kind of learning what it means. In the first movie we get to see what it means to be free. In the second movie we get a touch of what it means to go after revenge, you know,
Hmm.
how to be peaceable. But I think that's more so focused on here is like at what degree at what degree can you go after revenge while also maintaining who you are. And for Caesar, he's always fought for peace no matter what.
Hmm.
It caused a conflict with him and Koba in Dawn,
Hmm.
and and it answered his fight for peace, answered the question that just because you're an ape doesn't mean you're good, and just because you're human doesn't mean you're bad, that who you are, what you do with the intelligence that you have, is what determines your quality. And Caesar wants apes to be free, but he wants them to be good. He wants apes to be good,
Hmm.
and that's why he stays peaceful. And here we get to see, him lose it all, and what does it mean for him to go after revenge? Can he still maintain himself while being while going on that path that ends up just hurting yourself? And I think we get a nice resolution to that here, because Caesar doesn't bring down the downfall of Woody Harrelson. He doesn't go through with the revenge. He decides
Hmm.
at the very end to turn it away. The final scene where the colonel has succumbed to the mutation of the simian flu, and
Yeah.
he's devolved into a primitive man. um he easily could have killed him, but it would have served no purpose other than to fuel that hatred and revenge that Caesar had, and he instead chose to let it go.
Yeah. And he
And he
allowed the
ends up
colonel to kill himself.
right. And what do we get after he decides to do that? We get all of the apes free to their proverbial the paradise that his son had kind of found past the desert. And so with this trilogy, I think we do get a really nice end cap that, sure, you could set it up for, it doesn't say it outright, but yes, the apes continue to prosper. We see with Bad Ape um that just because the simian flu is out in the air, that other apes are beginning to become sentient. They're gaining intelligence
Hmm.
naturally, not just from this small group. But I think we get a really nice end cap to this resolution of the apes at the end of this movie are beginning to form a civilization, not just be intelligent, but beginning to form a society. And I think in Kingdom, we're going to see that explored, I think more so maybe in this next trilogy of, okay, now we're here, what do we do with it?
And I feel like it is a I feel like what I'll say is like Matt Reeves did a great job of ending Caesar's story while
Mhm.
allowing the Planet of the Apes story to continue. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's what he did. He left enough breadcrumbs to have it picked up, but he did give a satisfying conclusion to Caesar's story, who of course died and succumbed to his wounds at the very end, but also teaching his son a very powerful lesson, like you said, about revenge and all those other things. So, it's
Mhm.
very hard to like conclude a story and still leave the door open. And he did a fantastic job of that. And like the action side of me, like wanted to see the apes versus the humans like in a whole war front, like shooting each other and just lots of action and lots of battles. But again, like the more like cinema critic, the more storyline driven part of me is like this makes more sense. This is what we needed. That would have been a different character. That wouldn't have been the Caesar that we knew from Rise and Dawn. And so keeping it that way, because I'm sure Matt Reeves could have went that route, especially calling it War from the Planet of the Apes. Um, but choosing not to, I think was a good testament. Because even while Caesar was in the camp, he was still trying to be peaceful. You know what I mean? Like he was
Right.
still trying to be, even while he was captured and being tortured and beaten, he was just like, the apes need food. Like, come on, we need to help them. Like he was still trying to work for collaboration with the human. Well, not necessarily
Right.
collaboration, but peace, at least. He wanted to maintain the peace.
Absolutely. And I love, like, kind of speaking to that, I love that little bit where we just get the Colonel and Caesar in like his room, and they're just talking about mercy.
Hmm.
Caesar's coming at him, you're not showing us mercy. And he's saying, would you have shown me mercy, dude? I killed your wife and I killed your son. What are you gonna do to me? Like
Yep.
you're here to kill me. You want to talk about mercy? And already we can see through the Colonel how devolved humans can be, even with intelligence. Like intelligence isn't the thing that made or didn't make him. It was him feeling justified in making those hard calls of killing his own son. This ruthlessness. And what does that mean? I think in the subtext of the movies, they're saying that humanity was dead
Hmm.
long before they physically died, when they're resorting to making those decisions. And Caesar notices this, and he chooses the opposite because he doesn't want to end up like them. And all of this to come from a Planet of the Apes movie.
I know. It's so deep for a Planet of
I,
the Apes movie.
I like it. And I don't think that this is necessarily the best rendition of a revenge story and what revenge really means to yourself. But the fact that we get a really fun ape movie at the same time as getting like a nice exploration of some of these themes, I think elevates these from just being schlocky junk food into
Yeah.
being movies that I'm more comfortable going back and rewatching again and again.
And like with this film in 2024, um Planet of the Apes will be the longest continuous running sci-fi franchise in cinematic history, if I'm not mistaken, because it started way back in the 60s. And I don't think there's any like sci-fi franchise. Like I think James Bond was coming, they had like movies in the 60s, but that's not sci-fi. You
Does
know what I
James?
mean?
Yeah, I was
Like
about to say, does that
it's
count
not
as
sci-fi.
sci-fi?
No. That's a spy thriller. But like that's the whole point. Like, sci-fi couldn't really exist until the 60s because, you had to have some kind of like special effects. But I'm pretty sure this is the longest running sci-fi franchise in the history of cinema. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, but like, do you really need to see these three movies to see Kingdom? I don't think you do. But like during the trailer, there's a scene where he's like, say his words, apes stronger together.
Hmm.
Apes stronger together. Like the king in the trailer of Planet of the Apes is
Uh-huh.
rallying all those apes. And again, if
Hmm.
you watch these trilogy, you know that's what Caesar's like creed is. That's what he says. Apes are stronger together. That's the same thing that
Hmm.
he uses to inspire the apes in Rise. It's the same
Hmm.
creed that Koba uses to turn against him in Dawn. And it's the same
Hmm.
creed he uses in this movie when he liberates all the apes from their imprisonment.
Hmm. So you mentioned it a little bit, but the special effects in this movie look fantastic. Like all the
War, yeah.
apes look amazing. And I'm very curious to go back and rewatch Rise to try to compare to see how far they have come.
Mm,
But I mean, this is just what happens when you use mocap because Andy Serkis
yeah.
is Caesar, and
Yeah.
he does such a great job at physically acting as Caesar. And it's so something that I feel like is hard to imagine being believable, looks so believable on screen.
Hmm.
Like they did an amazing job with the visual effects.
And I think in the first one, and I think they did a good job of sometimes films will bite off more than they can chew. Like with The Flash, all that CGI in their last scene. Did you see The Flash?
Nope.
Yes, you don't know what I'm talking about. Probably
No
for good
idea.
reason. Sometimes films will bite off more than they can chew, and they'll try to do something cool with CGI, and it just doesn't work, right? Like in The Flash, there was a whole scene at the end where he's like seeing all these. They had a Nicolas Cage version of Superman show up as like a
Hmm.
nod to the Reeves. They de-aged Christopher Reeves, the Superman, and brought him back for like a multiversal appearance. And it was like so over the top, so clearly
Hmm.
fake, and just so off. And it looked so bad that it took you completely out of the movie. And I'm like, that scene did nothing to enhance the movie at all. All it did was like
Hmm.
bring it down because the CGI is bad. And I didn't really need a Chris Reeves cameo I didn't need a Nicolas Cage Superman cameo
Hmm.
in my Flash movie. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing? And I
Yeah.
feel like Matt Reeves, even the first director of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, they are one of those directors that, like, if they're doing a scene for CGI and if it doesn't look right, and they're like, we just can't get it to look right or we don't have the technology. I feel like he's more willing to cut a scene that doesn't work CGI wise and adapt his story to make sure it all feels realistic. Like he won't force a scene in there with subpar CGI. So I think Rise of the Planet of the
Right.
Apes did a great job because you really only focused on Caesar. It took a while for the other apes to get brought in, so you didn't need to invest
Hmm.
as much. You just needed to show one ape and then Dawn, obviously there were more apes in Dawn, and then obviously War probably had the most apes because there were barely any screen time for the humans. And so you can
Hmm.
really see how they worked with what they had, and as they got more, they did more. And they never
Hmm.
did too much, it never took you out of the story, and it was all done extremely tastefully, which you
Yeah.
cannot say for all of the Planet of the Apes movies.
It's just a testament that when you put that kind of effort into your visual effects that they will last so long.
Hmm.
Like I'm sure we'll eventually get around to talking about Jurassic Park, but the
Yeah,
first Jurassic Park to me to this day still looks fantastic
it does.
because of
It
the
really
amount
does.
of effort, the entire rig for the Tyrannosaurus. It looks amazing, and I will never. This is the hill I will die on. Practical effects will always trump visual, just pure CGI
Oh yeah,
every single day, and I will die
practical.
on
Yeah.
that hill because it can make things even like the original Star Wars movies still look corny but believable. And I have
Hmm.
seen some garbage CGI since then that will completely ruin a movie experience.
Oh yeah,
And no shade to the actual people who worked on it. I'm sure that it was a budgeting and financial decision that put them in
yeah,
that, not the quality of the CGI engineers. But
yeah.
when you put the effort in, it will stand the test of time.
Well, I love how you brought up Jurassic Park too, because I saw that movie when I was a kid. We were both born in '97, so that was around the time, when I was like 4 or 5 or 6. I remember watching those movies over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Jurassic Park, Jurassic Park 2, Jurassic Park
Hmm.
3. And I always thought they came out like around the same time I was born. Like well, I always thought they came out around the same time I saw them. So like in the
Hmm.
early 2000s when I was like 5 or 6 or 7.
Right.
It was a really intense movie actually for parents to show a 7-year-old, but
Very
well,
freaky.
that's another
I
that's
had
another
nightmares
topic.
of dinosaurs.
Oh, for real?
100%. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh my God.
oh
Yeah.
man.
The
Okay.
Velociraptors
Oh,
when
Velociraptors were scary. Yeah, I heard those in my nightmares too before.
when Laura Dern is in the dark engineering room, and then she grabs Samuel L. Jackson's hand.
Oh, and it's just
Oh
his
my,
hand. Oh my
and it's
God.
just his hand.
Oh,
It's like,
I
I
think I
think we're gonna
finally got
be
over that.
okay. And then it jumps up. Oh my God, gave me
Yeah,
nightmares.
I think my dad didn't actually think about who was watching it. He was like, I just want to see this. And my kids, I have kids, I guess, so they're gonna have to see this. But either way, I always thought it was kind of like the CGI of the time, like
Hmm.
Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man had great CGI for the time that it came out, great practical effects for the time that it came out, especially. But when
Hmm.
I saw Planet of the Apes that came out in 2001 with Mark Wahlberg, I
Hmm.
literally thought that movie came out in the 80s. I thought it was an 80s movie because it looked so bad. I
Yeah.
just assumed. It wasn't until now that we're like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes getting ready for it that I looked up and saw like, oh, this came out in 2001.
Hmm.
And like Jurassic Park that came out 7 years earlier still holds up today. And Planet of the Apes does not from 2001. So it really shows the difference between like effort and putting it in. And again, the difference between like making a movie just for the IP and trying to capitalize on it or just making a good story. And again, not biting off more than you can chew. Like I'm sure Matt Reeves was like, I could make like a really bombastic movie and like really stretch our budget. He's like, but each of these films has been more story driven. It's been more character driven.
Hmm.
So he kept with that, and I think that's what made it a great film. And I can only hope that Kingdom looks like it's going to kind of follow that route, maybe give us like a little bit more on the action scale. But I
Hmm.
guess we'll just have to wait to see.
So now that we're done with this trilogy, what is your favorite of these three? Rise, Dawn, or War?
Oh, that's tough. That's actually tough. But I kind of think I'm gonna go with Rise.
Really?
Yep. I know it sounds a little odd,
For
but I
such an
think
action guy, like
I
that's
know.
that's the
I
least
know.
actioned movie.
But I liked seeing Caesar grow up. I liked
Mm.
seeing him get older, and I liked seeing him. I think the best part to me of that movie was because again, he had been raised. We forget that Caesar has been raised around humans his entire life.
Yeah.
He mostly knows interaction. Like his childhood, at least, is full of interactions with humans. And so
Hmm.
watching him grow up, meet apes, and have to get accepted by those apes and then become their leader
Hmm.
to me, because when the apes first see him, it's kind of like going to a new school and everyone knows you're not from that area. Like even though they're apes, they still treated him like, oh, he's an outsider. Like they could just tell, even though they didn't know he'd only been raised by humans, you could just tell. And to me,
Hmm.
it felt like a really good story of him not just like fitting in, but showing like I have something to offer. And like you said, becoming coming into his own. Like you wouldn't think that you'd be talking so much about the growth of an ape,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
here we are. Like that's why I liked Rise of the Planet of the Apes. That's what and his character growth from a reject to a leader, I think is powerful. Because by the time Dawn comes around and by the time War comes around, he's already kind of come into his own as a character. It's more about the growth of people around him. And while that's
Mhm.
still interesting, his growth to me is the most impactful story that I really got into. And especially because the stories don't offer a whole lot of action. So when they don't, I'm going to gravitate towards the story because that's what these movies are offering.
I think Rise definitely has the best scene in all of the movies, and it's when he first says no. That is the
Hmm.
give me chills, man. It's such a good scene. That scene alone makes it such a classic because and it's so weird too to think of how far Caesar has come. Like thinking of him in like Dave Franco's like attic, like looking
Yeah,
outside of the window, and then cutting to War of the Planet Apes, where he's a father and he lost his
right.
family and he's going to kill Woody Harrelson. Like it's such a funny
It's
turn of
crazy.
events.
Yeah, and it's like, and again, Caesar, I think I love Rise too because we see him mistreated by humans and
Hmm.
apes. We see
Hmm.
him mistreated by both, and yet he comes away still loving both, still wanting the best for both. Um, and yeah, like I said, never thought I would be like this invested in the story of an ape. But what about you? Out of these three, which one is your favorite?
I think Dawn.
Don?
I like
Okay.
Dawn the most just because of how messy the situation is that
Hmm.
it really like it hit me in the gut of how like it's so messy but everyone feels in their own way justified for how they are reacting to things. It's just it's a such a chaotic situation that it just feels ripe for war to break out with
Hmm.
tensions so high, but to still have humanity in it. I think these movies work best when they are treating the apes as people,
Yeah.
not as animals. And I think too they work best when they're treating the humans as animals.
Yeah.
I think the
It's
allegory
powerful.
works best when we have that. And while I love how animalistic Woody Harrelson is in the Colonel, I think I just like the way it was portrayed in Dawn a little bit better.
Yeah. So I guess I'll leave you with this question because you just mentioned how ripe the things were in Dawn for war to break out.
Mhm.
After watching War for the Planet of the Apes, do you feel like we saw a war break out or just kind of like more the aftermath of it?
No, we should have switched the titles of Dawn and War. The second movie felt like it was way more a war
Hmm.
for the apes to survive. This didn't feel like I feel like the consequences of this movie were kind of set out with the humans killing each other. Like regardless of what Caesar was doing, the other humans were coming to kill Woody Harrelson regardless. That was going to always happen. Um, and maybe it's referring more to how do you act in war, and the colonel is making decisions that are not very human, and Caesar ends up making decisions that are very, human or ape focused. But
Hmm.
no, call that Dawn. Because literally the ending of the movie is like that picturesque like sunset
Yeah,
as he's
it kind
dying
of makes
on
sense.
a
Yeah.
hilltop. Like that's the dawn of the
I'm
planet
like,
of the
I also feel like you could call this one Rise because like this is where they like actually rose up and like took over the planet. I don't know.
Mhm.
Names in the movies, I'm sure they spent a lot of time in the writers' room trying to decide. Now, is this a dawn or is this a
Is this
rise
a
or is this a
rise?
war? We know we can't use conquest or battle or
Hmm.
escape because those are these
Those have
titles.
been taken.
Yeah, we're
I
trying to
swear,
distance ourselves from that, but
there better be a kingdom in this next movie. If there is not a
oh
kingdom
my
in
God.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I'm gonna scream.
I think you'll be okay. I think you're gonna get that in this one.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
well, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you tune in when we cover Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes coming out May 10th, which is today. um, I don't know if you'll hear this today, but we recorded this on May 10th. So, yeah, and then we will cover it. What day are you gonna go see it? So no, I'm going on Tuesday.
I'm probably going on Monday.
On Monday? Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, so then we'll have that out probably sometime next week. And so keep tuning in, and thank you
Hmm.
guys so much for joining us.
Yeah. See you later.